Hello, this is hi. This is Fam Electric Ghost. I'm just gonna do a little brief intro. We have Missing Sons on the line, right? Laura?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is it just gonna be you or the whole band?
It's just gonna be me for tonight.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna do a little brief intro. It's Fam Electric Ghost. We have the podcast on Anchor FM, and we've been interviewing indie artists from around the world. We have about 22,000 listeners right now worldwide. And I wanted to give a brief introduction based on your biography on Spotify. So, the Missing Sons are a rock and roll band based out of Queens, New York, and you're the lead singer and lead guitarist as well, or
a rhythm guitarist?
Rhythm guitarist.
And the songwriter.
Your primary songwriter, yeah. So you have a brand new EP this year, right?
Yes.
We had one out in 2018 called "The Ballad of the Troublemaker."
Ballad of a
Yes. And your latest album EP is Shut Up and Deal.
Yes.
Okay. And your sound is like indie rock, grunge, 70s psychedelic rock, kind of blending into this new kind of sound. Right. I kind of heard Blake Babies. I heard in your song. I heard like Sonic Youth.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I'm kind of showing my age because that's where the bands I kind of grew up listening to. Like,
okay, I grew up listening to them just a couple. So.
Like Huskadoo and Replacements, but you kind of channel the female male combination of like the Blake Babies, Juliana Hatfield, and then also like Sonic Youth is like that kind of merging. You actually go back to like Velvet Underground and Nico.
Wow.
Had that kind of thing, and I've always loved that. That's the beginning of like indie alternative rock is like the Velvet Underground and Nico.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think you're channeling that, and so I just wanted to start from that, and then we have a bunch of questions that we sent you that we usually start from the first one.
Right.
So when did you first get into music? At what age?
Well, I really have been into music for as long as I can remember because I was lucky that I grew up in a family that really appreciated music and loved it. They weren't, musicians themselves, but they were involved fans, and my mom was very involved in the 70s punk scene here in New York City. So I got regaled with that. So it's been mainly my whole life.
So was your mom like at CBGB's, back in the day with like Talking Heads and all the great bands that used to go through there?
Oh yeah, but she was more of a Max's Kansas City kind of girl.
Oh, Max, that's another great place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start actually like working on music and deciding that you could write your own music? Because a lot of people will start off, covering other artists. Did you start off covering other artists, or did you start off like writing your own tunes?
Well, when I first learned how to play guitar at around 13, I would play some other people's songs just to get kind of introduction, things I heard that I liked. My primary in songwriting of my own. I don't do a lot of interested in maybe dabbling with a little bit going forward.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things I like to talk to like indie bands. The reason I talk to indie bands is I like the idea that a band's going to go out there like the Sex Pistols and they just write their own stuff. That to me has always been the place of music that I always went to. I used to listen to college radio, before the internet. There was like the college radio and like REM and the Huskadoo and all those bands kind of came up through that.
Right.
And it's the singer-songwriters, the Grant Harts, of the world, the Juliana Hatfields of the world, the Tori Amos, people who actually sit down and they're going to create their vision. And I think what's great about a singer-songwriter is that, you don't have these producers kind of like distilling a vision. You get the full vision like an author. And
yeah.
I look at
that's how I like to look at it too.
Music's like being a novel.
Yeah. I like to think of, I've only recorded an EPs, though I hope to do a future LP one day. But I always considered it almost like a book, and each song its own chapter in that way.
Yeah, I'm very much same. I grew up listening to the band and Dylan always wrote these really cohesive pieces, like from Blonde on Blonde,
right?
To like he would always write these very cohesive, very literate, visual stories, and the band did the same thing. They just, like, if you listen to like the band, it's like you can kind of feel this Americana thing going on,
Absolutely.
and you can picture those songs. And that's why I think about singer-songwriters is so great, though back in the 70s and the 80s, that you had so many singer-songwriters bringing this kind of vision. And then you have like the indie kind of grungy vision, that Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots and all those bands,
Of
Alice in
course.
Chains, they kind of brought that back because, new wave is cool, and I'm a keyboardist, so I appreciate
Right.
new wave, but it's I always had a punk aesthetic, and I loved the Runaways.
Yeah.
That's I've always been into that. Liz Phair is a big uh, uh, star. I love to follow her. I think she's great. I think that, so that's the kind of music I like to listen to a lot. Sleater Kinney, you kind of channel that too.
Oh, absolutely. They might be my favorite band. It's hard to say exactly, but they would definitely be up there for me.
Yeah, I'd like to hear another Wild Flag. I like that variation.
Yeah, they were very good too.
So when you realized that you had a talent for writing, was your primary instrument the guitar, or did you start on any other instrument when you started
Um,
writing?
well, I actually started. I had a very good music program. I was lucky in my school district. I started with the saxophone
Oh, cool.
because guitar wasn't an option. But once I looked into music more on my own, yeah, guitar was always my instrument.
That's interesting. I started on a wind. I started on the clarinet, and then I
Oh,
switched to like back in the day. I got like a D50, a Roland D50, and I
oh yeah,
back during the new wave era.
right.
Okay, I showed my age, but I was a kid when I got one of those, and it's just like I was trying to just emulate the Cure and New Order and Joy Division and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just cool to see where people start, because I know some people start with piano because you can write everything, but a lot of singer songwriters, they write on guitar because that's like a really good writing instrument.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope to. I'm gonna be getting Ableton soon,
Oh,
which I
cool.
think will be interesting and opening up a lot of new doors when it comes to songwriting. Give me access to make all these different instruments and sounds accessible to me.
Yeah, that's
That's something.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that. I think there's a lot of ways that you could do it while still honoring the soul of the song and rock and roll itself, basically. And I think that there's been a bunch of new albums that have kind of honored that in different ways. So I'm very excited to dabble in that with songwriting coming forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool tool because not everybody, even like I'm a keyboard player, so I have Modes and Rolands,
Right.
the actual keyboards, but not everybody can afford that stuff. So getting a MIDI controller in Ableton and getting some plugins are cool. Just because I'm a keyboardist, I'm kind of old school purist. I used to listen to the Allmans and Rick Wakeman from Yes, so I'm kind of like, well, I got to have a Moog.
Yeah.
I got to have a Jupiter because there's a certain thing about those instruments, the same thing as like a guitar.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
when it comes to like certain synthesizers, you, the plugins don't really cut it compared to actually having a real one. But to be able to write and to be able to move forward as a songwriter, yeah, you can use a Casio. It doesn't
Right.
matter. If
Right.
you're really, I mean, look at Jack White. He could take $100 plastic guitar. It doesn't really
That's
matter.
true. Yeah. That's true.
But yeah, it's just the cool thing about like dabbling into like Ableton is a songwriter. Then you can actually add strings. You came from being a sax player, so you could add horns, and you'd have that
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
ability to kind of widen what genres you're in, which is kind of interesting. Like the Clash, I think the Clash were one of the greatest punk bands ever because
Yeah.
they could cross into reggae, they crossed into African rhythms and ska, and they just mixed it up. And because they were willing to look at that, and even hip hop back in the day on Sandinista and combat rock. So
Right.
yeah, I think that opens up, to you being able to use an 808 type drum machine. They
Yeah, you
kind of,
get all those sort of options and stuff. For a millennial, I'm not always the best at technology, but I've been doing my research, so I'm really hoping to put this to good use.
oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do. I mean, I have real 808s and stuff, but they're getting a simulated 808 or finding something that sounds like a Lin LM1, which is what Prince used to use. Just those things and like the history of like electronic music. Getting those Moog sounds or a Prophet 5 sound or a Jupiter 8 sound. There are plugins you can get that. You don't have to spend like $10,000 trying to find a Jupiter 8, you know, but you can bring
Exactly.
that sound into your thing, and that kind of brings it that new wave feel. Like you'll sound like The Cure, or you'll sound like New Order, and you can kind of
Exactly.
take that, and then I think it's always cool to see what a guitarist does with a keyboard. Because you know one of the biggest examples, I'll just talk a little bit about that, is like Pete Townsend, you know, one of
Right.
the greatest guitar players, but the stuff he did with like Barbara O'Reilly and Won't Go Fooled Again, he is considered by synthesizer players to be one of the greatest synthesizer players, like up with Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman, because he approached it in a different way. And I think that's what you can bring to the table if you, because you play the saxophone, play the guitar. When you approach synths, you could come with like a guitarist or saxophonist sensibility and do something that a keyboard player might not do.
That's very true.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Well,
so that's always kind of been my style, even with guitar. I'm, for the most part, self-taught when it comes to guitar. So what I, lack in sort of the theory and technical abilities like that, I, try to experiment or seeing if I play this chord, but just do this a little differently, what will this do and how does it go with that? I try to keep it creative that way.
That's awesome. I think that's the future of music, is where people, aren't afraid to break the rules or to do things that just feel good and not care about, if that's the traditional way of doing it. I think that's really interesting. So I kind of name check bands I thought you sounded like, but if you were going to talk about who your influences are and reference points are, who would you actually name check?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say specifically. There's so many. I mean, Sleater Kinney, like you mentioned, is one of the primary ones. I grew up listening to the '70s punk from Patti Smith, and then eventually with Iggy Pop, all that. And then I was also very influenced by the '90s. My parents had Nevermind, and then my mom came in the room one day after I was playing it for the, I don't know, millionth time, and she said, his wife had her own band, and you should maybe look into them.
Oh, Courtney Love, yeah.
That
yeah.
opened up to the '90s that, took me on the greater part of my childhood. Those albums came with me everywhere, being, the generation of the iPod Classic where you could do that. Got myself 120 something gigs, and I loaded everything up from my local library and would just walk around with it. But I mean, also being from New York, we had a great movement here in the early 2000s with bands like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and the Strokes. So I would definitely
Strokes are awesome.
myself
that's
influenced
awesome.
well.
Yep. Hello?
Hi, yes.
Yeah, you're still there. Okay. You just dropped off. I know you mentioned the Strokes and the Yeah-Yeahs.
The Yeah Yeah Yeahs.
Yeah. I love the Strokes. Yeah. So that's a cool band too, because I like that kind of, like, I've always had that kind of punk aesthetic.
Absolutely.
Even when I try to use keyboards, one of the things I like about analog synths is that, if you go back to like what Trent Reznor did,
right,
he was using Moogs to take that electronic sound and make it punk. And analog synths like that can actually do that very well because they have that kind of, power. They kind of cut through the mix. So that's one of the things, like, if you get into it, there's some cheap analog synths out there. They're not so expensive, but when you get into it, if you really want to have that kind of punk power, there's nothing like, like an Arturia or like some kind of Moog, small Moog, will actually always cut through the mix and really give you a lot of power.
That's good. No, thank you very much. I just wrote that down.
Yeah, like there are little Moogs that aren't so crazy. I mean, Moogs are expensive. It'll cost you like $600 for the cheapest Moog,
right?
But it could give you something that just cuts through, like an analog signal just cuts through, because it's like a pure sound, and there's so much you can do with them. They're not stuck on presets. They deal with like the wave from you're doing sound design. And it's like your own sound. You don't have to pay anybody for a sound or pay a subscription. You're building your own sounds. But yeah, that's interesting that you're in that New York scene, which I've actually played a couple of times. I played at Blackthorn 51.
Okay, I actually live not too far from there.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I did a Phantom Electric Ghost show there. and I did my one man show. I like the fog machine and the lights.
Right. Yeah. It's a good old time venue like that. It looks like
Yeah,
it's been around forever. I would think it has. Everybody kind of knows it. The problem is most of the shows in New York City are concentrated in Brooklyn and Manhattan,
yeah,
primarily in Brooklyn, but mostly Manhattan. So having
yeah.
somebody go all the way out to Elmhurst and Queens is like, what
It's
is this
hard.
place?
It's hard to get your fans to show up there.
Yeah, it's rough for most bands, even us, coming from Queens primarily.
Yeah. Like Fat Baby probably pulls in more people, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah. I was just playing. I'm from New Hampshire, so playing in New York, any place in New York, I was like, oh, I was just happy.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
But
I still feel that way. So
yeah, because the problem where I'm from is everybody wants to hear like "Stairway to Heaven" for the millionth time,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
and they want to hear, they want somebody to, they just want you to play the oldies but goodies, and that's fine. But I want to write my own stuff. I want to play my own stuff. So I think New York is like the greatest place for that, where you can do that, and the crowd is so receptive. So have you had really good experiences that performing? I know I read your write up that your live performance is like a key part of your stage act, right?
We try to, yeah, and it's also for 2020. I'm thinking of expanding, adding some other elements and things like that to add to our stage presence. But yeah, I mean, we've been lucky that we've gotten to play a bunch of shows. When we first started playing about February of last year, we went for a few months where we were doing what felt like a show a week, where we were just going wherever would have us often we could just to get the experience. And now
Oh, that's great.
we're trying to build on that. And I actually put on shows on my own now, because the one negative about being in a city that's so big, so many opportunities and places to play, is that it's very scattered. So it's hard to kind of concentrate things. And once things get concentrated, that's when you have the movements that we've seen that have been defined by these decades in this area or this region. Um, so under the name Missing Link Collective, my few friends and I have started putting on shows this year. We're looking to expand on that in 2020 as well. But we have all different types of bands. We don't keep it, strict to one genre. As long as, you have the same mentality of wanting to build community, we welcome you. And we have all different types of visual artists, performance artists. We have local fashion designers and things like that. So we kind of centralize and bring a sense of community to the creative scene out here.
That's cool, because I love playing in New York, and it's cool to see a movement like the grunge movement. Like the one thing I've been somewhat disappointed in is, I understand the EDM trance kind of market, and I'm an electronic musician. A lot of people confuse DJs with keyboard players. Like,
Right.
a keyboard player is
Does
not a
not
DJ.
like that.
Yeah, and so I've had people say, "Oh, can you do my show at a frat house?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, what do you want me to do? It's like, oh, you're a DJ. It's like, no, I'm a keyboardist.
Yeah. That's
So I don't want to come
gotta
with the
hurt.
CDJ and like and run tunes. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
And so it's really heartening to see a band like yours, which kind of goes back to the day when I was like listening to college radio and seeing bands actually playing real instruments and coming out with real songs. Not that these other songs aren't real, but to me, I grew up listening to bands like Yes, and Hendrix, and
Yeah.
people who are really, and
Right. I
there's
mean,
nothing.
every so often you'll have, I mean, I do agree with you. I grew up with a lot of that music, but it didn't always really stick to me, even if I respected, the creativity that went into it. But I look at artists like Robin or even some of Lady Gaga's stuff, where it has that heavy electronic vibe to it, but there's still very smart lyrics and,
Yeah,
craftsmanship
it's
of the
yeah,
song.
it's kind of got that Bowie-esque thing, because Lady
Yeah.
Gaga is channeling Bowie, so that's still kind of one foot in the old school, where she's very theatrical. She's taking like an actor's vision for music, which is really cool. Like what Bowie really, he ruled that, and he could transform himself into characters, and Lady Gaga does that. She actually is very Bowie-esque in that way, and she's a musician, but she found ways to, like, okay, with production, beef it up to become, top 10, top 5, there's a certain level you have to get to do that, unless you're going to be like a Nirvana and just be pure all the way and happen to come in on a movement. Then you don't need a producer telling you what to do. You'd be a band like REM. They did what they wanted, and then the fans came to them because they created a style. I kind of love bands that do that. They kind of force their style upon the world, and everybody actually comes to it.
Right. Well, that's also part of organizing shows. Is we are, in addition to getting to help a bunch of other artists in a similar position to I am, I get to see what works and almost curate an audience in that way. So I'm able to, grow in that way. And it's not going to happen for anybody if we don't start paying attention to each other. Other people will start paying the crowd, but we got to, be the crowd for each other, so to speak.
Yeah, well, that's where this podcast is. Like, I decided that, I'm on Instagram and, other artists would like my stuff. And then I would say, okay, if you like my stuff, I got this podcast. I dig your stuff. Let's talk. And so I've tried to create this sense of community on the net by pushing nothing but indie bands. Nothing but I've talked to some bigger label bands, but 99% of who I talk to are bands that are, working bands trying to make it. And I felt they needed a showcase. So that's why
I appreciate it, and I'm sure most people in the position would be. But it just goes to show you, so social media isn't so bad. Sometimes every so often, it comes in with a purpose if you use it right.
Yeah, because one of the things I was disappointed in, there's people out there that will charge artists like $50, $100, $200 to do what I'm doing right now. Which I felt like, I'm a music fan. I'm a producer. I'm a musician. And I'm like, I like to talk to bands to find that sense of community because I'm interested in your process, and so I'll talk to you because I don't need to make money. I find when you're trying to make money, it's like, okay, fine. I end up getting money anyway, even though I wasn't out to do it. I get sponsored, Spotify actually Anchor is part of Spotify, and Spotify actually pays me. So I wasn't trying to do that. It just happened. But I wasn't going and asking the bands for money, so I think that's what sometimes when you start something, it can become something and you didn't even, you're not really trying to out there. Not that you shouldn't make money. And I'm not against money. I sell my records and stuff. I try to make money.
Of course.
But I think if you're telling somebody you got to pay $200 to talk to them on the podcast, I'm like, okay.
Right. I mean, there is definitely plenty of those, or get my advice for $300. I mean, I understand it too. Everybody wants to make money doing what they love. Who wouldn't want to do that? So I don't, it is shitty sometimes. I hope I can curse a little bit.
Yeah. We don't care.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it can be a little, all right. Yeah. It can be shitty if you're, if you're doing it excessively. I know, like, when I put on shows, as soon as the expenses are covered, we'll divvy the rest, amongst the bands and performers, the people who are selling art and pieces and stuff like that. There's no fee for them to participate, and we don't take any cut from what they make, from what they sell. That's all theirs. That's their art.
That's cool. That's kind of like that hippie aesthetic. It's like the Grateful Dead. The old school aesthetic. Back in the day when people were just like, hey, I did it because I love the music.
I like the art, and at the end of the day, if I want to build a name for myself and I want to do this, I want to do it. I want to be known for the right reasons. I want to be known as somebody who did it by being a good person, not just somebody who was trying to tear somebody else down.
Yeah, you got people on some sides of the business. You pay, asking people to pay $3,000 to get a feature,
right?
And I'm
exactly.
like, okay. It's like when I collaborate, I never ask for money. I've done 3-4 different collaborations where I've done albums with other artists, and we just did it because we had a vibe, and I found I liked a band, and I just did it. I did work with a band in New York City, and we actually put Lonnie Claire, and we did an album together. We exchanged files and we worked on it for a couple months, and then I did another album with a woman out in Los Angeles who's actually an actor, but she dabbles in electronic music, and we put together an album. We just did it because we were vibing on each other's stuff. I listened to some demos and I was like, that's cool. And if we make money after the fact, we published it. It was like, fine, we'll make money then. But it's like, if I hear something really cool and I want to work with somebody, sometimes I would, just do it, which is kind of like, that's the old school way of doing it. But,
yeah, I mean, there are still people like that, but as the band leader, whenever I'm able to give my bandmates a couple bucks at the end of the night because we've made it, it always feels rewarding. Because no matter how much, even if it's $5 a person, the fact
yeah.
that you make music just makes it feel a lot more significant, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The thing is, like, doing a contract is like, it's cool to, and to be in the industry, but like I like I'm kind of like art first, and if it makes money, then it makes money.
That's
So
exactly it. That's been always what I've said, because I'm not one of those people who's so quick to say, oh, this band sold out, because they just happen to make a little money. The way I always saw it was the creativity and the songwriting has to come first, and if canceled out, just make it a pure organic work, and then that's when you market it. That's when you do the business and all that. But it's
yeah,
50-50 if you want to go anywhere.
yeah, because like you look at the story in Nirvana, I mean, Kurt Cobain was just doing what he wanted. He didn't really want to be a star. He had that punk aesthetic. He had those great songs. He was like a new John Lennon. He was writing amazing stuff, and the world just made him a superstar. And he probably didn't want to be. I think he would have been more
Right.
comfortable being a smaller star. But sometimes you do that work and people find you
Right.
just because you're pure. And I think Kurt Cobain is a really good example of a pure artist. Just the world just found him. And I think like REM is another example. They were just pure indie artists, and the world finally heard what Michael Stipe and those guys were doing.
Yeah.
And then they became super. And it's not like they sold out. It's like the world finally clicked into what they were doing. Um, and they got a lot of money for it, but it's like I never thought they sold out. I just think the
Absolutely not.
the
No, they
world
were.
found them.
Neither band did.
So so you said you're getting into Ableton. So when you get into that, are you thinking of changing the genre of your music in any specific way, or just using that to continue the way you're writing now, or are you going to introduce elements that would change, cross genre into different things?
Well, I think we've basically always kind of crushed genre a little bit. That's just kind of naturally because I'm into so many different types of music, and I've been fortunate to get to play with very talented musicians who are capable of that.
Mm-hmm.
On our last EP, for example, we have a song like "Girl," which was the lead single. That's very much so in the vein of like a White Stripes kind of garage.
Yeah,
That goes right into the song "Kids at Play," which is very dream pop kind of sounding.
yeah, kind of Sonic Youth
I
sound too. It sounded like a little bit of Sonic Youth, in a way, when they did that kind of atmospheric stuff.
I'll take that. Thank you very much. But yeah, so I see it being having different aspects that'll help with either side of the extreme, whether the super gritty punk rock and roll or the dream pop kind of side of us. I think it'll have applications for either. I don't think it'll change anything completely. Like I don't think I'm ever gonna be an EDM artist after this or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I do think that it'll help add to it and make it a fuller vision. So I would be able to do what I have in my head completely,
Mm-hmm.
having access to that all in one place.
Would you ever think of doing something like a Joy Division, New Order, kind of that type of Depeche Mode type of style? Because those kind of tools could let you go that way, and that sound is not that divergent from what you're doing. Still kind of got that attitude.
Right. I try to make it so that the attitude is a good way to say it, or the soul of the music, as I like to say. I try to make that the connecting force.
Yeah.
I try not to put too much emphasis on it all having to sound a certain way in order.
Mm-hmm.
Think if as long as I'm true to the narrative that I'm going for and the soul of the music, it kind of sounds cohesive naturally.
Yeah, I think that so that kind of goes into a question. Like, I dive into is like when you write songs, do you have like complete ideas before you actually touch your instrument, or do you kind of work out an idea and it becomes something that you continue to refine? Because some artists will say, "Well, I had this dream and it just kind of came all together," and other times it's like it's heavily labored. Is it do you have multiple, different ways of approaching songwriting?
Oh, definitely. That's just how it happens naturally. I don't even think I have much of a choice in that. But it really depends. I have some songs that I heard melody in my head first. That I then came up with lyrics to it. Um, kind of found something on guitar that felt like it fit. And sometimes it's the opposite, where I'll get a guitar riff in my head and then build a song lyrically and everything around that. There's been a couple of songs I've done where I started with the title and what I knew I wanted to be about. Kind of just approached it with, okay, well, what do you want to say about this?
So
And took that.
that's interesting. Have you ever started with like a full set of lyrics and then found music to go with it, or do you always start with the music and go to the lyrics?
It depends. There's a few songs where I've been able to do that. But a lot of times, even if it's the lyrics that are coming first, I have some sort of melody in my head that I'm
Hmm.
saying them to.
Okay, that's cool. Because like sometimes when I started, I was a poet and I actually had some
Mhm.
published poetry, and I was like very hesitant to actually sing. It took me a lot of years. I was just as a keyboardist, I never sang, and I had all this poetry. And then one day I said, well, I'm going to take my poems and try to turn them into lyrics. And I just, for a couple of years, I just kept on going through all my poetry and trying to make it fit within music I had written. And
I've done a lot of that too. Absolutely.
and then I started to realize I have a home studio, so I can continually record all the time. And I'd started to naturally find my voice. And I kind of now I do kind of like stream of consciousness type of recording, where I'll have an idea and then I'll get on the keyboard and then I'll kind of just go with an open mic and just record and then find the song in like 30 minutes and just play it.
Right. No, that
And,
that works too. I've definitely one thing that I've learned in my, couple of years of doing this now is I write everything down, whether it's on my phone or a notebook. I always keep with me.
mhm.
Because even if something, doesn't then, it might be good for something that you're thinking of 6 months from now. So I try to just kind of keep everything.
Yeah.
If I'm ever stuck, or if I just kind of need, a little jump start for inspiration, I'll read through it and I'll be like, oh, this line didn't work for that, but I think it can maybe work for something else, and build on it that way.
That's the cool thing about having a digital audio workstation. I actually use like hardware recorders. So I actually have hardware recorders and mixers, kind of old school. And I'll just like run a session for like 3 hours. And then kind of like, because my heroes were like Neil Young and Crazy Horse and bands like that and Allman
Right.
Brothers. That's what they used to do. Sometimes they go in the studio and they just play. And then they like Neil Young's Tonight, it was just them jamming most of the time. And then he would go back into the tapes and pull out the songs and then refine the songs. And I've always felt like sometimes I'll come up with an idea where I really physically create a 5-minute song. There are a lot of other times I'll have like, 60 minutes worth of a studio session and I'll pull them out of that.
Yeah.
Which I actually find it more satisfying to do that than the other part. But this is the older I get, the more I like to just jam. Can I just do it because I like to?
Yeah. No, I get that.
um, so have you thought of like you have your collective? Have you collaborated with like the bands in your collective, or you guys are still like separate artists? Have you when you do shows, do you kind of have other bands like join you on stage and like do jam sessions and stuff like that?
We haven't done that yet, but that is something, especially for the ones that we put on ourselves, having like a jam session. We were thinking at the end could be a good way to kind of bring people together and playing with each other. In terms of personally, like from the Missing Sons collaborating, I would be interested, depending on what I was going for that particular one. But it's
Hmm.
something that I'm keeping in mind for going forward. My I felt like this year we're able to get a lot done, having albums under our belt and playing shows. So from 2020 to me is about kind of, okay, well, what we're here, we kind of got leveled. What can come next? So that's
So
what I
yeah,
referenced,
that's
in coming forward or 2020 or whatever the case may be. It's a lot of, okay, we're here. We have a solid foundation. Now let's see what we can do next.
so you trying to have you played outside of New York, or have you thought of like joining like festivals that could take you to like Europe or Asia or anything like that? 'Cause I did see some fans on your Spotify in like in Japan.
Yeah, you never
So
know.
yeah, so you never know. It's like a lot of times I found some of the bands I like to listen to. They actually, one of the greatest artists, like Liz Phair. Liz Phair took her Exile in Guyville tour like worldwide, and it actually worked really good outside the U.S., which was interesting. She
Yeah,
actually
you get
did
a
that.
lot of example. You could see that a lot in history. I mean, look at how many bands had to go to England to make it.
Yeah, well, Hendrix. I mean,
Yep.
Hendrix is like the premier. He was on the Chitlin circuit working with Little Richard and a lot of these other soul singers. He was like doing their backgrounds, and
Right.
he was playing with the Isley Brothers. I have all these tapes because I'm a Hendrix fanatic, and I got him playing with the Isley Brothers and Little Richard, and then he's like, he wasn't getting anywhere because then those bands didn't really want him showing off.
Of course.
So every time he showed off, they would fine him or kick him out. so it's like Chad Chandler from the Animals found him and set
Yeah.
him up in London, Cafe Wah, and then boom, all those guys found him. I think that Chad Chandler was like the member of the Animals. He became a producer,
Right.
and he became super big in England. And he came back at that Monterey festival, and boom, he was slamming. But he had to go out to come back, which is sad that you can't make it in your own home country
Yeah.
with the
Well,
blues.
but it is true. But in this day and age, because of technology, it's also connected. That
Yeah.
you know, you're lucky that you can connect with people from all over the world. It's never been as accessible as it is right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, I interviewed a band in France a couple of weeks ago. I interviewed a band from Berlin. I've interviewed bands in London, punk rockers in London. I've been able to interview, like, I'm trying to collaborate with this artist in the Netherlands who kind of sounds like Bjork.
Oh,
So this kind of social media has been really good for me. And I actually do Facebook live shows from my studio. Um, and I get like 4,000 people to watch them,
wow.
which is pretty cool. And it keeps my chops up between concerts because I can actually do a live concert and kind of practice. And I still get a pretty good audience feedback. And I'll try new material and then see what people think. And it's really cool. I mean, there's all kinds of cool technology. I'm just using an iPhone on a tripod and a roll and go mixer hooked up to my mixer, and then I can get a really good signal and a good picture. And you can do a show on the net. And so I get a lot of people around the world to listen to me, and that's how I kind of got this podcast, doing stuff like that. But yeah, it's just really cool what you can do now. So even if you can't get into a venue as a band, you can build a following by doing live shows on Facebook or live shows on Periscope or whatever, or even Instagram. You can do that.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely can. It's just a matter of balancing it. I'm lucky where, I'm living in a city where there's so many places to play in time.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
we've done
You
some
got the
stuff on
best.
Instagram
It's
Live.
like being in LA.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
you're in New York or LA, then you can just walk out the door and get to a venue. You live in Concord,
Yeah.
you live in New Hampshire, and you're like, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially walking then. But yeah, I mean, for that reason we've done stuff on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, putting parts of our shows up, taking snippets from rehearsal or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's a really good way to get your social media up, and then you can start trying to do it on YouTube is a little harder, but Facebook is pretty cool. Um, you can do live on YouTube. It's just a little trickier. I've had some issues with it, but Facebook has been something I've been able to do all the time. Not that I'm pushing for them, but uh, but yeah, it's just cool to be able to get out there. What I'm doing now through this podcast is actually a couple of the bands I've interviewed have agreed to do a Facebook Live, like like festival on live. Like, so I'm gonna have from 3 bands I've interviewed actually do like an unplugged kind of, well, performance from their home studio, and every band is going to play on that session. So you're going to have like one band play like 20 minutes from the home studio, and then another band play 20 minutes from the studio. It's all going to be kind of streamed live. So we're setting it up for 2020.
That's really interesting. I see that working.
Yeah. So I mean, we're going to try it. We're going to experiment with it, make sure we got the right kind of equipment to get it done right. But it's just making sure every band actually has the same level.
Right.
Because you don't want.
That'll be difficult. That's hard enough to do when you're all in the same room.
Yeah. Well, it's trying to make sure the signal is good for each one. So we're doing some like test shows first to see how it works before we do the first, to a kind of like a beta tester.
Absolutely.
One of the bands is going to try. Yeah, but like if I get that going, would your band be interested in doing that?
Absolutely. We've been wanting to do more of the acoustic, not to do primarily, but you get to kind of be a little more intimate and a little bit more, you get to bring a different side to the music when you have an opportunity to do that live as well.
Yeah. If you have a good tripod and you got a good like smartphone, because most of the modern smartphones can do it. And just got to be in a good Wi-Fi environment, have the tripod, and something like a roll and go mixer just to get the signal, so it sounds good, so you can send it over the net. But however you do it, if you got the way to do it, or you can use somebody's studio or something to do it, it's cool. We can work on that later. But whenever I know you're busy, but yeah, we're gonna try our beta test with the stuff I'm talking about. But yeah, if you're interested, we're probably gonna try more of them next year. So
yeah, please keep me posted. We're always looking for new opportunities like that. I think in order for a young band to make it in today's world where the music industry is, shaky to say the least,
yeah.
creative and how you approach it.
Yeah, I think visually, I mean, doing this show is cool because bands get to hear, your fans get to hear a lot about who you are. Because sometimes bands, like fans, they listen to your music, but they never get to hear your voice. And then
Right.
places like MTV and stuff don't do what they used to do. Like I remember 120 minutes was the show. They used to actually have the guys from Sonic Youth like interview other bands. Thurston Moore would actually be on like at 1 o'clock in the morning interviewing Who's to Do or interviewing REM or interviewing some hip hop guy. And it was cool. And it was like, where's that? That's why I've been trying to. Yes, I've been trying to do like a video version of the show, but that's been like we've had some false starts on that, but we're going to try to do that next year too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so we're always trying to progress. I found as a musician, I haven't been as successful at my music as I am at my podcast, but I didn't stop. I still do both. But this year I got signed to a label after like 20 years. It took a long time.
Congratulations.
But yeah, so yeah, you never know what happens. You keep on pushing, and finally it happens. So that's what I would say to any band is that you have your vision, you keep on doing what you want to do. You network like what you're doing with your collective. That's great. I think collectives are the way to go. In hip hop, you see a lot of collectives like Brockhampton and Odd Future and
Absolutely.
stuff like that. Yeah, I think
I was very influenced by that because they're smart about it. They're very passionate about their cities. You hear them in a lot of their songs. I really respect the way rap has gone. I think that as a songwriter and as a person who wants to do music, I've benefited from growing up with it.
Yeah, it's just cool to see the collectives because it's kind of like challenging the record companies, because like the Odd Future Collective, Tyler, the creator, he makes tons of money from that Camp Flogna. They get more money than this label gives them.
Well, that's because it's not like how it was anymore where, you get signed to a label and that, and then you've made it essentially. It's hard to make money off of record sales and things like that. You have to, in the same way, just on a grander scale, they also have to be creative.
Yeah, and it's creating a big festival like that, like that's the vision. Like every artist, I'm an electronic artist. I've been trying to get like-minded keyboard players like myself that like analog and still believe in analog to put together like the show. And that's why I'm trying to do this show that I was talking about. We're going to have some artists, from Sweden and Netherlands that are into that. you know, that aren't like running CDJs, they're running Moogs. You know, they're using Euro racks. We're doing like, you know, experimental electronic music. And we believe in it, and we think if people see it, they'll see what we're talking about. I think visually it looks really interesting when you see people, you know, manipulating sound that way. And I think the visual, and if you have a stagecraft to it, like I wear LED costume, kind of like a dead mouse. I wear a ghost costume. It's all like LEDs. I have a phantom mask that lights up and flashes, and you know, you have your stagecraft. But that's not the, you know, the music is more important. But you do have to have some stagecraft to get people to pay attention. But yeah, that's always interesting. So you were talking about like elements to your show. So when you changing your live show, can you expand on what you're going to add?
Well, if I'm able to, the idea is if I'm adding from using Ableton and things like that, I always try to make the live experience as close to as I can get it on the record as possible. With, you know, some room to improvise, because
Yeah.
that's part of the live experience. But I always try to give the best quality sounding show that we can. So if there's something where we're incorporating synths or something like that, I would love to be able to do that live.
Yeah, that's a sequence. Yeah, like because I'm kind of primarily like a one person act. So instead of using like a DAW, I use kind of like hardware digital recorders, which I found sometimes like the problem I've had with DAWs is like you have your Mac and then it crashes.
Yeah, exactly.
The cool thing about like what I use, like a Zoom R24 digital recorder, it never crashes. And so I have a 24 track recorder that has my original master on 24 tracks. I go to the show with my 24 track recorder, and then I can mute and unmute tracks, and then I play with it. And
Yeah,
basically
that's also an option.
it gives you like the same experience, but it's like dead reliable. It will never blow up. You know, the battery doesn't go down. It's a wired machine. So it's like never gives you a problem compared to like what can happen with laptops, which can. Sometimes you have to have backup laptops if you get too dependent on Ableton and stuff like that, because they can crash on you. But it's just different type of things. Even once you get big out there, and you need to have backups. You know, having a backup shows you're doing good if you have doing that many shows.
Yeah, well, it's not so bad to play to stuff like that too. I've seen a lot of bands do it, and I've considered that too as an option if need be. Most venues now are equipped where you would be able to plug it in and you could play to a track.
Yeah, a couple of places I played. You know, when I played at that play venue I told you in Queens, I did that, and then I played in Boston. I played some shows in Boston, and that's how I primarily play. But I have a lot of hardware sequencers that are just like synth sequencers, so they're kind of dead reliable too.
Yeah.
And then when you use like a sequencer versus like a DAW, it's pretty dead reliable. So it's kind of cool when you use those, because then you have the ability to kind of play the dial or play the filter. What we say in electronic music is you can take something that was already running and then you can alter it while it's running, and so it doesn't have to sound what you originally wrote. And so it gives you some kind of, you know, ability to not be just bored with what you did. You can actually change it up enough to make it spontaneous, to make it seem like it's like not just canned, which is kind of cool if
It
you
is.
think about it. Yeah, it's just a cool way of doing something to have stability, but also have creativity or not being stuck on the loop.
Yeah, for sure.
um, so what are your opinions of the way the music business is being done, like streaming services versus if you could sell your CD or people buy your download? What do you think about like streaming? Um,
Well, I mean, like I was saying before, I feel lucky in the sense that, you know, it's the most accessible for me to put it out all over the world, and I get to do it directly where I don't have to go through somebody else, and it automatically has the same access as any other song. But I mean, I think it's the results are in basically with what it's done to the music industry in general. I think they're still pretty much scrambling to figure out how they're going to make it work without having album sales be the focus.
Yeah, what I found is I have to do alternative things like this podcast, or when I do a show, I bring a physical CD that I produced myself and I sell it myself, kind of like
Right.
at the back bag at the back of my trunk, or I do merch, and I make more money
Yeah.
selling a T-shirt than I do for my streaming, which is somewhat
Yeah. Merch
disappointing
merch is
as a
definitely the way
musician.
to go.
Yeah, I think, but it's kind of disappointing as a musician. Is I can make more money selling a T-shirt than my album. Like, when does the music actually get? I mean, the music is causing them to buy the T-shirt, but it's like
Exactly.
it would be good to make what you should actually make from your music. It should be valued. So it's got to be a
Well,
way
yeah.
for us to get the music valued again. You know?
Well, you could be, these streaming services can be paying artists and the minuscule amount that they currently are. I
Yeah,
think that help.
that's. I
I
mean,
think
that's the
the way
thing.
that setup doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it seems like it seems like if you're a big artist, you get a bigger piece of the pie. Like a Taylor Swift, not to put her down, but she gets a bigger piece of it. And then
Right.
everybody else gets the smaller piece. And then the question is, like back in the day, like, well, you got what you would get. Then you have this kind of sliding scale based on A level down to E level talent or whatever, and it's kind of like it doesn't seem fair for the work you do. You know, if you sell
Well,
this many, huh?
even the biggest artists, when you look at the cut, I forget what it is exactly. When you look at the percentage they actually make from streaming, it's shockingly low. Not
Yeah,
that I, going to be
yeah.
crying for Taylor Swift the same way I'm going to be crying for a local band, but percentage wise, it seems like it could be recalibrated to make a lot more sense.
Oh yeah, it's way lower than what you used to get when you sold vinyl or you sell a CD. It's
Right.
nowhere near, and it's basically the devaluation of our product, because somebody will pay $50 for an Xbox game, but they
Yeah.
refuse to pay anywhere like $10 for music. So it's the kind of like
Right.
the this where they.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you're going in and out a little bit. I'm sorry.
I give them a living wage.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, you went in and out a little bit, but yeah, you do have to give somebody a living wage, no matter what the job is that they're doing.
Yeah, if you're willing to pay $50 for a video game, you don't think if you have a band you love, you can't spend $9? you know,
Right.
I mean, I don't want to come down and get people mad. Oh, I don't think. Well, okay, fine, but it's just the reality. That we shouldn't have to make money off of T-shirts and posters. We should be able to make the money off the record. Um,
Absolutely, but unfortunately, the system is not set up that way now. But that's why, whether it's be physical or something, having other means of income or other means, whether it's merch or something else, or like organizing a show or festival or things like that.
yeah,
Um,
shows. Yeah, I
yeah,
think shows are the way bands make. It's kind of like if you go back, we're kind of going back. If you go back in music history, like the Motown acts, like if you weren't Smokey or Stevie,
right,
you were the Temptations or the Four Tops, the way they made their money was they had to tour incessantly. They had to tour. That's the only way they got cash. And it's kind of like that again. you
right.
know, because even though you're writing your own music and you own your copyright, you're not getting the songwriter level money that that the Funk Brothers or Smokey or Stevie Wonder used to get. Nobody's getting that anymore, and I think that's got to change in some ways. I don't know how that's going to change.
Oh, I certainly would be the one to figure that one out. I'm no expert when it comes to the music industry, but for my own, I kind of faced that reality coming into this, that I knew even if I was lucky and got to be one of the, few that made it, that wouldn't be how I would be making any sort of real money. So that's why, whether it's things like putting on my own show, or I'm looking to collaborate with some of the artist friends I've had from putting on shows, people like who can and things like that,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
work on really cool new merch for 2020. And I'm up to the challenge of having to be creative on how to get myself out there.
Yeah, the other way to get it is like, actually getting your song put into movies, TV shows, and advertising. Uh,
Right.
And see, that's the other big ticket. And being an electronic musician, there's a lot of places like, for just ambient music is being used like everywhere.
Of course.
So if you're a synthesizer player and somebody wants a 30-second bit of music, and you've got your Roland Jupiter, and they give this moody sound, and somebody can use it, and you get more money from that than you do from your Spotify.
Oh, 100%.
Which is interesting. I mean, and then people don't even know. The cool thing about that is like you have anonymity. Nobody really knows who you are.
Right.
You sell your music and you make money, but nobody really knows you. So sometimes as a musician, your ego is like, I wanted people to know Phantom Electric Ghost. But I actually I make more money as my regular legal name selling stuff that nobody knows I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how it goes.
Yeah. So I mean, you find what you can do to get out there, and you do what you love, and it just you get where you're going. But it's just interesting to me. Like, hopefully, for the next generation of musicians, something will change where they won't have to go what we're going through right now.
I'm sure they're going to figure out. Always did. Or I mean, if you look, there's some people who really benefited, even if they didn't make that kind of money, specifically from streaming. You look at some like Chance the Rapper, who was able to come up basically independent, and just by himself on things like that properly. So I try to look at it as the glass half full, because otherwise it'll just be too.
I mean, if you get on social media, you become a YouTuber, and you come up through YouTube or SoundCloud, or Instagram, you get the buzz, or like TikTok, you get the buzz. That seems to be the new thing. Like TikTok is like the new big thing.
Right.
A lot of artists coming through there. It's like the new SoundCloud. It's not exactly SoundCloud. You only hear a little bit. You only hear snippets like Instagram, but it's enough.
Like almost enough
to get through. Yeah, it's enough to get through though. Sometimes a 1-minute snippet can get you out there. But it's cool to talk to you. I'm very I really like your music. I was listening to both your EPs, and I think everybody should go out there and listen to your. This is a really good band. The Missing Sons. If you're playing in New York and you live in New York, you should go see them. And we're going to include the link to your Spotify, your artist link, and your album link for Show Up and Deal on this episode, and it will be promoted on 11 different podcasts, including Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and a bunch of other ones, up to 11 different podcast platforms.
Thank you very much. And anybody who is in the New York City area, our Missing Link Collective show, the last one for the year, and possibly the Missing Sons last show for the year, is going to be at the Well in Bushwick. The show starts at 8 p.m. And everybody is welcome. It's $10 at the door and 21 plus.
Cool. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later. We'll definitely keep in touch. When you have new material and you want to push your new album, let us know, because we do album release episodes. So we can set that up.
I definitely will. We plan to record this upcoming spring, hopefully to be able to release by the end of next year. So I will definitely keep that in my mind. I had a lot of fun talking to you. It's
great. Thank you.
I always enjoy listening to people with good taste in music.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
You too.